Hello, I'm Steve Livesey, and I'm going to be talking to you today about your drone's return to home function. Now, before I begin, I want to say that in my opinion, return to home is the single most important safety feature on your drone. In fact, it's so important that virtually every drone on the market today has this feature built in. Okay, so what is return to home? Well, simply put, return to home is an automated flight mode that when triggered will cause your drone to fly from its current location back to its original takeoff location. Okay, so what could cause this to happen? Well, there are several conditions that will trigger a return to home. The first and easiest is going to be a manual activation. So you as the drone pilot always have the ability to manually trigger a return to home. And if you're using a DJI drone, if you look on the left side of your display, you will usually see a little button that looks like this. And it's very, very easy and intuitive. So it looks just like, hey, I want my drone to return to its home point location. Okay, the other common scenarios are more emergency situations that would trigger this flight mode. The first emergency situation would be that your remote control loses contact with your drone. So when your drone is flying, it's continuously connected via a radio signal to your remote control. And if that signal is ever interrupted, your drone will immediately stop its current operation and fly back to its home point. Okay, this could happen because you fly behind an obstacle like a building or a hill or a ridge. It could also happen because you fly too close to maybe a cell tower or power lines that have some kind of EM electromagnetic signal that's going to interrupt that communication between your remote control and the drone. But whatever the reason for the loss of signal, your drone will immediately return to its home point location. Okay, the second emergency scenario is far more common, and that's going to be that your battery reaches a critically low level. Now, what does it mean for a battery to be critically low? I don't have an exact percentage calculation, because when your drone is in flight, it's continuously calculating and estimating how much power will I need if I need to initiate a return to home. So the biggest factor in that calculation is, of course, going to be the distance. So the distance between your current location, if you're only a few hundred feet away from your home point, that's going to be a very different calculation than if you're on a longer mission and you're up to maybe a half a mile away. Okay, so that's what could trigger a return to home. Now, how does return to home work? Well, believe it or not, the return to home process actually starts before you even take off. And there are two key things that you need to take care of before you take off. The first is going to be to set your drone's return to home altitude. And this can be set on your remote. Your return to home altitude is going to be a safe altitude above any obstacles that might be in your overall flight area. Okay. Now, the second thing you need to remember, you need to take care of before you take off, is going to be to make sure that your drone assigns its own home point location. Okay, so you power up your drone, it's going to sit there for a while on the ground, and with a DJI drone, you're going to hear something like home point activated. Okay, and that's going to mean your drone has solidified its GPS signals and it knows where it is, and it's assigned its current location as the home point that it's going to return to in case of one of these emergency conditions. Okay, so once you've done that, let's say you've assigned your return to home altitude, your drone has set its home point, and you've taken off and you're flying around your flight area. Okay, now when one of these conditions is activated, what happens? How does return to home actually work in flight? Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is your drone is going to stop responding to flight commands. It's going to be stationary, and it's going to immediately ascend straight up to that return to home altitude that you have previously established. Okay, the next thing it's going to do is it's going to attempt to make a beeline flight to your original home point location at that altitude. Now, I say it's going to attempt to because let's say you didn't set your altitude correctly. Maybe there are some obstacles in a way. Return to home does use obstacle avoidance when it's available on your drone. But remember that obstacle avoidance is not foolproof, so it may try to maneuver around some obstacles that are in its path. But trees, power lines especially, are very difficult for that kind of function. So it's always safer if you just remember to set that return to home altitude high enough that you're going to be above any obstacles. Personally, I like to set return to home at my max altitude, which under most conditions is 400 feet above ground level. Okay, finally, when your drone reaches its original takeoff location in the air, it's going to immediately start to descend, and when it gets low enough, it's going to execute a standard landing cycle, and when it's on the ground, it'll power off. Okay, so that's really, it's fairly simple. That's how return to home works. But one thing you need to remember about this function is that you, as the drone operator, are always responsible and accountable for what happens to your drone when it's in the air. So what happens in the air is your responsibility, and as part of that, you should know that you always have the ability to cancel your return to home function in flight. Okay, why would you want to do this? Well, the fact is that things on the ground may have actually changed to where it's not safe to land at the original location. Case in point, a few months ago, I was flying at a local park near my house, and I had taken off from a parking lot, actually taken off from a parking space just a couple of spaces down from where my vehicle was parked. Okay, well, this was a 20 or 30 minute flight, and when the battery got low, the drone initiated its return to home. Well, during that time, somebody had actually parked their car in the original parking space that I had taken off from, so it was no longer safe to land there. So when the drone got close by, I was able to cancel my drone's return to home function and pilot it 20 to 30 feet off to the side to find a safe location and land manually in that situation. Okay, so that's really all there is to know about return to home. Some special things to note. Your return to home location, keep in mind that it is a geographic latitude, longitude point on the face of the earth. Now this gets established at the beginning of your flight, but you should be aware, you should make sure you're situationally aware of where you are, because if you're on something that's moving like a vehicle or a boat, this comes up a lot with boats, that your landing location is not necessarily going to be the location on the earth that you took off from. Okay, your GPS coordinate doesn't change with the motion of the boat. So keep that in mind as you are operating on some of these less stable platforms. If you're operating the ground, it's usually very straightforward. If you're operating on a moving platform, be aware that you need to maintain much more situational awareness. You probably may not even want to use your return to home function in these cases. Okay. Now the final thing I want to say before we leave is that return to home is like any other feature on your drone. You need to practice. You need hands-on practice to make sure you are comfortable with those functions. Okay, it's not enough to watch a video like this or getting classroom instruction and think you have the knowledge in your head about how that function is going to work. Believe me, the first time you actually use your drone's remote return to home capability, you do not want that to be when you're in one of those emergency situations. Okay, you want your focus to be on your situational awareness, and if you've never done it before, you're going to be focused on the mechanics of how to operate return to home or how to track it, and you're going to be focused on your remote and not necessarily on the situation that's in the air as your drone is navigating back home. Okay, so that covers what I wanted to tell you about in this lesson. Thank you very much for your time, and happy flying.